If God is the author of the true story, then there's also someone trying to tell a different version. Jesus called him a liar and the father of lies. Satan can't create anything new. He can only distort what God created good. Hey, welcome back to the channel. We all love a good story, right? Every film that pulls you in, every book that breaks your heart, every song that stirs something deep inside, it's all telling the same kind of story. A world that was good, something that went wrong, a hero who shows up and somehow everything gets restored. Why does that pattern keep showing up? Maybe it's because story isn't just something we tell. Maybe story is how reality actually works. The Bible begins with, "In the beginning, God created." That's not poetry for its own sake. That's an author introducing his story. The universe begins with words spoken by God. Creation itself starts as narrative. And we as humans, made in his image, were born into that story. You were created with story in your bones because you were created in the image of a storyteller. That's why every great story feels familiar. It's why we cheer for heroes we've never met. Somewhere deep down, we remember this. C.S. Lewis said, "We don't tell stories to escape reality, but to remember it." He and Tolkien once sat together at Oxford talking about why we're so drawn to myths. Those old tales about dying gods, brave rescues, and restored worlds. Tolkien said they move us because they're echoes of the one true story. The story that actually happened and is happening. That's what Christianity claims. Not a myth about meaning, but the myth that became fact. The myth that is fact. But before we get there, we have to talk about something else. If God is the author of the true story, then there's also someone trying to tell a different version. Jesus called him a liar and the father of lies. Satan can't create anything new. He can only distort what God created good. Every false story is a counterfeit of God's. It keeps the structure, but twists the center. In the garden, the serpent didn't invent a new plot. He took God's story and flipped the lead role. Did God actually say? He asked. It was revision and not rebellion. And that's how distortion still works. Think about all the myths humanity has told. Zeus, Hercules, Gilgamesh, Osiris, the men of renown Genesis 6 talks about. Could those have been echoes of something true? Maybe they were human memories of God's story twisted by time and pride. I think it's worth exploring because all those myths follow the same pattern: divine power, human tragedy, and an attempt to restore what was lost. They're not random. They're remnants. Humanity remembers the shape of the story but forgets the author. That's why Satan doesn't need new material. He just has to keep people reading the wrong version. Then something happened that no other story dared. The author wrote himself into his own story. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. God stepped into history as one of us, not in mythic time, not in imagination, in a real place, under a real emperor, with a name, a mother, a hometown. Luke says, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. That's a timestamp, not a fable. Jesus Christ didn't just tell parables. He embodied one. The story everyone's been trying to tell. The one that explains why everything is both beautiful and broken, walked into time. And he didn't just die a hero's death. He conquered the one villain no myth could ever defeat: death itself. That story, the story of death defeated, is the story every myth is attempting to tell. If Christ didn't rise from the dead, Paul says, then faith is pointless. But he did. That's what makes Christianity unique. It's not just true in meaning, it's true in history. It actually happened. That's why the gospel doesn't hide behind symbols. It dares you to fact check it. It says there's an empty tomb. There are witnesses. There's a timeline. It happened. And if it happened, then everything else in the story, the creation, the fall, the promise of restoration, isn't symbolic, it's solid. The story that explains every story is not a metaphor. It's the way things actually are. But here's where it gets personal, because it's one thing to say the Bible is true. It's another to live as if it is. Every leader, every believer, every human lives from a story. It's the story that shapes our choices, our fears, our leadership. If you live from the story that says, I am what I accomplish, you'll burn out. If you live from the story that says, I am what others say, you'll lose yourself. If you live from the story that says, I can define truth, you'll eventually collide with reality. But if you live from God's story, the one that starts with creation and ends with restoration, everything shifts. You realize you're not the author. You're not the hero. You're a character invited into redemption. Dallas Willard once said, the most important thing in your life is not what you do, it's who you become. And who you become depends entirely on which story you trust. The culture will keep telling counter stories, that truth is relative, that success defines you, that freedom means control. But the Bible story is older, truer, and still unfolding. It tells us that God made the world good, we broke it, and he's been redeeming it ever since. And one day the author will finish what he started. Behold, Jesus says, I am making all things new. That's the ending we were made for. That's the story every myth is trying to tell. So here's the question. Which story are you living from? The counterfeit one that flatters you, or the true one that frees you? Leaders, your people, your teams, your families are following the story that you believe. If you want to lead with peace and purpose, start by stepping back into the story that actually happened. Because when you live from truth, your leadership becomes witness, and your life becomes part of the story that still shapes the world. Thanks for listening.